Good evening. It is my great honor to introduce Mr. Felipe Queipo tonight. I have known Felipe for over 9 years now and would consider him one of my greatest advocates, mentors, and friends. I'll probably make him blush when I say this, but I can honestly say that I would not be who I am and where I am without Felipe. One of Felipe's main roles at the United Nations is to liaise with the faith-based organizations that are accredited to the UN through the Department of Global Communications specifically. And as a faith-based organization accredited to the UN, then his responsibility is to liaise with me. And over the years, Felipe has opened so many doors for me. As an example, he has always been encouraging me to submit proposals or to, go to this briefing or to participate in this. A few years ago, he encouraged me to submit a proposal for an NGO-led briefing through the Department of Global Communications. So usually it's like the UN staff that submits that arranges the briefings, but they have a handful of ones that the NGOs get to do. And he's like, Ryan, you need to do this. So I said, okay, I'll do it, because if Felipe tells you to do something, you do it. And so I submitted this proposal, and the proposal kind of worked its way up the chain, and eventually it went from being an NGO-led briefing to being the Focus on Faith briefing that is an annual event through the Department of Global Communications. We were able to get Sister Jean Bingham, who had been recently called as the General Relief Society president of the church, to come out and speak. And she got this global platform a week after being sustained as the General Relief Society president. That would not have happened without Felipe. But the thing is that Felipe does not show favoritism to me because I'm a member of the church. He's like this with everyone. As another example, a couple of years ago, I had gotten a ticket to go to the opening session of the General Assembly, which is where the US president speaks, and a bunch of other people, those other people. And Felipe he's like, you got the ticket, you got to get there early. I'm like, okay, I'll come early. So I get there like 7 o'clock in the morning or something. It was super early. And I'm sitting in the balcony where the NGOs sit, and I hear these people over here, they're like, Felipe told us to get here early. I was like, you know Felipe? And then this person over here is like, I love Felipe. Felipe is like this with everybody. He is a connector. He is a networker. He puts the right people in contact with the right people to make things happen, and he gets things done. Another example, in 2019, the UN hosted its first official conference in the United States outside of New York in Salt Lake City, Utah. And that was because Felipe knew Baldemaro Lago, knew the mayor of Salt Lake City, and was like, let's make this happen. And it happened. If I have needed to describe Felipe, which I have in the past, I would say Felipe has the deadly combination of being smart and competent and nice, which means he's often overworked and underpaid, but it also means that people listen to him. He's in the room where it happens, if you will. I'm from New York. I can't not make a Broadway reference. But like I said, I know that my life is better because I have listened to Felipe, and I'm so excited that you'll be able to hear from him this evening. So with no further ado, Mr. Felipe Queipo.
I pay him well, huh? Wow. Thank you for coming. It is an honor to be here. I'm Felipe Queipo, originally from Spain. I've been with the UN for the last 15 years. Started as an intern after I graduated from BYU, Idaho, and I had the chance to serve as the international community at the UN for the last over a decade, 15 years, 16 next year. I love what I do because it is a perfect extension of what I do at church, which is service. We are a service-oriented organization. We do care about the world. We do care about people, about everyone. And when we partner with academic institutions, UVU is here, one of the main partners we have. BYU is hosting this series. The idea is, how can we listen to each other? I hope I'm not going to give a heart attack to anyone by saying that I will not talk for the whole 90 minutes, I promise. I will present a little bit about the work that we do with interfaith and faith-based FBOs, we call them, faith-based organizations, on poverty. But I want you to ask questions and engage and express your opinion and be honest. We're here to be honest, and I promise to be as transparent and honest as I can. I love that I get to work with youth. I love that I get to work with CSOs and NGOs, and I love that I get to work with Ryan. I had to return the favor. I am the person that I am because of him also, and I have the patience that I have because of him. Not because of him, but because of his support. He reminds me constantly on the Christ-like attributes that I must have, that he possesses, many of them. He has a big family, and he's a wonderful friend and mentor. And we have worked together in very interesting things, and more that are to come. And the same about Baldomero. Baldomero Alago, Chief International Officer at UVU, is the culprit that I get to come to Utah a lot. And I get to keep ties with this amazing community. I'm LDS. I converted when I was 18. I served my mission in England. I credit to my mission that I am where I am because of the values that I acquired and the language skills also. I cannot speak English, but I learned English on my mission. And then I also learned about the value of human life and the importance of serving others and how much we care for each other. So today I'm going to talk a little bit, I promise again, not too much, but a little bit about the work that we do. But before I do that, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the UN, but I want honest, the cameras will not get this when you respond, but how many of you, I'm going to ask you a question, how many of you have a positive view on the UN, how many of you have a negative view of the UN, and how many of you have a neutral opinion on the UN? And I want you to be honest, because we're going to talk about many things about the UN, and we are not perfect, but I hope that you can express yourself, that it's an open forum, right? So how many of you have a really good or a good positive attitude or understanding or impression on the UN? Okay, I'm not going to get overly excited. Good. How many of you have an okay vision? The UN is okay. It's not that bad. It's not that great. Is it? Okay. How many of you think that the UN is useless, that it should be defunded, or that it should not exist, or that it's not that good? Thank you for the honesty. Sometimes I agree with you. We are a very imperfect organization, but we do our best. And we have amazing people behind a lot of work that are trying to service over 8 billion people on this planet. Imagine the task of servicing 8 billion people on this wonderful planet. And there's only, in total, with agencies, funds, and programs, 125,000 of us working for the UN system all over the world. Is an impossible task without external partners. So when we engage with real actors on the ground, we engage with those that care the most. And those are usually faith-based organizations. Out of the active CSOs we work with at the United Nations, particularly the Department of Global Communications and the Economic and Social Council, around 2/3, or 60 to 66%, are faith-based. Imagine how important faith is in the world and how many changes are happening because of that engagement. To ignore that reality would be a huge mistake for the UN. And thank goodness for the past few years, I've been allowed to engage with faith-based organizations because we have seen the value and the impact that they have. Globally, we can learn a lot from faith traditions. Let us not forget, the UN has been around for 78 years. Yesterday was her birthday, by the way. Yesterday we turned 78. I would say that for 78 years old, we are not in bad shape. We're doing okay. We could do better, but we are not that bad. But 78 years is nothing compared to the thousands of years that faith traditions, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Christianity have been doing. So there's plenty to learn, plenty of experiences to learn, and expertise on those who work on the ground. I pride myself in working for the UN, but I work in headquarters, New York. So I'm not on the ground. I'm not really getting my hands dirty, and I'm not really, we have projects on the ground, and I visit them, and I have great experiences. One of the pictures that I will show you is from the slums in Kibera, in Kenya. But the real heroes are those who are really daily working on the ground with people and saving lives and risking their lives. Yesterday, our Secretary General expressed his concern on the situation in Gaza. And the region at large, but particularly in Gaza, we have lost 35 colleagues. in the conflict since it started on the 7th of October. 35 UN international civil servants that have risked their lives, and they decided to stay with those that needed it the most. People who faced persecution and poverty, extreme hunger. Those are my colleagues. Those are the real heroes. So for me, it's an easy say we are pretty good. We are really good. The real heroes are on the ground. And next to them are faith-based organizations and NGOs. And they are the real heroes in here. And when we had our prayer and we were thankful to be here, I want you to be mindful of those that cannot be here or that cannot gather in any setting to learn, to be educated, to be bored to death by a UN official or to worship even. To have them in mind because they are the ones struggling. And this gospel that we claim to be followers of and that we have as a core value in our lives is the reason why we should look at each other as brothers and sisters regardless of any label, faith, tradition, demographics. We are all children of God. To be a member of the church at the UN is a blessing to me. I've learned to love people through the service that I provide through the UN, and I've learned to be a better member of the church because of the incredible experiences that I have with the UN. And it's a fun ride, but it's complex. Underpaid, for sure, overworked, and but very rewarding. I would not change my job for anything else in the world because I love what I do, and I love service. And I think that Heavenly Father has led me to be an international civil servant at the UN and to enjoy and to be able to provide service. As I said, I graduated from BYU, Idaho, and President Iron gave a blessing to the graduates saying, you will be ambassadors of the gospel wherever you go professionally. I believe that was more than just a simple blessing or prophetic view. It was a task, a requirement, an expectation of sorts. So I've been able to help in many instances organizing events that Ryan has put together, or we have worked together to do many things, and we have advanced a lot the work on interfaith, not just our faith, but all faiths at large. Ryan works in New York with the interfaith community, and he chairs one of the committees on the family and many things that are working on. So anyways, poverty. We're going to talk about poverty. I'm going to talk about causes of poverty, and I'm not going to go very technical, but we're going to talk about how it relates to the work that we do and our faith-based engagement. We're going to talk about poverty versus extreme poverty and what qualifies for extreme poverty, the causes of poverty, what faith-based organizations are doing in this work, and what the UN is doing with the agencies, funds, and programs and all the efforts that we have. And I hope to give you a broad picture of why, for example, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the United Nations are working hand in hand in many areas of the world, in many projects, and are making such a big difference. Last year, the church donated to the World Food Program, was it $32 million? A check with 32, it was the largest single donation to provide food for the refugees and people in need globally. Previously, the previous year was 21 million plus one to the COVAX initiative for COVID-19 vaccines for developing countries and economies that did not have the means to provide for their own citizens. And the church was there saying, you know what, let's support UNICEF and let's do this for them. There's a common agreement that people matter and that each individual matters and that we are all children of God, and as such, we have a duty and obligation, a responsibility to service and care for everyone. We are brothers keepers. So I take that personally at the UN, and I get to do that professionally and ecclesiastically, and is a source of joy. I'm going to talk about the different causes, and there are 13 of them. I promise I will make them quick, as I said. The first one is inequality and social injustice. Conflict is another cause of poverty. Hunger and malnutrition, lack of health systems, lack of employment, lack of access to clean water, sanitation, and hygiene, what we call the WASH approach. Climate change, lack of education, lack of public works and infrastructures, global health crisis, lack of social governmental support systems, lack of personal safety nets, and high cost of debt. Ryan challenged me to use climate change during the speech instead of miling it down because it's so politicized. When we talk about climate change, We have a different approach in the church. We call it earth stewardship or environmental stewardship. And it's the same thing. It's protecting the planet, caring for the planet that God has given us to care for, and to make sure that everyone has the access to the resources that they need. Let me start then with inequality and social injustice. One of the main reasons for poverty is that not everyone is the same. Before the law in many cases, in many countries, but socially also, people with disabilities. Women in certain countries cannot drive, cannot have private property. They cannot even have a passport. They cannot open a bank account. Children don't have certain rights in certain countries, like education. For example, in Afghanistan right now, we have a system, a regime, the Taliban, which are considered a terrorist group, that has prevented women and girls to access education. Just by virtue of being girls and women, they don't have access to education. That leads to less labor opportunities or work opportunities. So they're preventing them from advancing in society. Therefore, some groups in society, as I said, minorities, people with disabilities, women, youth in many cases, they have the perfect ingredients not to be able to get out of poverty. I'll talk afterwards about how faith-based engagement changes this. Conflict, not new to us. We have right now an illegal invasion of Ukraine on the part of Russia, with atrocious crimes being committed. We have the conflict in Israel and Palestine that has exacerbated. Our Secretary General yesterday got in hot water when he said in the Security Council that this attack by Hamas on Israel did not happen in a vacuum. And he explained, it is not justifiable. You cannot justify what Hamas has done to Israel. It's terrorism, pure and simple. They have killed innocent people. We cannot claim that that happened in a vacuum. That is something that happened overnight, that all of a sudden someone on 7th October said, let's attack Israel. This comes after 56 years of occupation. So when he denounced the violation of international humanitarian law in Gaza by not allowing for water or food or medicines or fuel to get into the Gaza Strip, the people paying the price are citizens. For us, children of God. The target is a terrorist group. This is a member state of the United Nations, Israel, attacking a Hamas group, a terrorist group. We have another one, Hezbollah. We have the Jihad, the Palestinian Jihad. We have different ones, but Hamas took responsibility on this and carried the attack. Conflict generates poverty, and poverty tends to lead to conflict also at the same time. It's a vicious cycle. And not providing for the means of people to be able to escape that reality, or to be forced, to be pushed from their land to become refugees or political asylees, it only exacerbates the problem. So this is the second cause for poverty. Hunger and malnutrition. It's not that poverty causes hunger and malnutrition. It's also that hunger and malnutrition causes poverty. Why? If I don't have anything to eat, I don't have the energy to work, I will not be able to provide for my family. So again, we go into cycles. How can we stop this from happening? We have the means, we have the mechanisms, we have the approach. But this is one of the main reasons that we have poor people. Lack of health systems. Not everyone has access to health systems, the sanitation, hospitals, clinics. Evidence of it is that, again, we have service people like the World Health Organization that has different programs, the Pan American Health Organization, UNICEF also has different health programs, UNFPA has health programs, because in some instances, no one is providing for them, for the people that need it. I'm going to say this, I'm going to refer constantly to the same thing. We're talking about children of God. Okay? Regardless of anything, our teachings, our beliefs, our core principle in the gospel is that we are all children of God. And the golden rule that we find in the scriptures is, by the way, at the UN, on the 3rd floor of the United Nations, there is a beautiful mosaic by a painting by Norman Rockwell. And Nancy Reagan, the first lady, in 1986-87, she commissioned a mosaic reminding people of the golden rule. Do unto others what you wish to be done unto you, upon you. And he's right next to the 3 chambers, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, and the Security Council of the United Nations, as a reminder to all the member states. What is the rule, the first rule that they should abide by? And that is caring for others and serving others. As I said, one of the main challenges in the world is the lack of access to medical care. and due to conflict, and it can be mixed. By the way, these don't come in vacuums or silos. They usually come in packs. Poverty leads to hunger. Hunger leads to lack of employment. Lack of employment means lack of access to resources and healthcare. Lack of employment. People want to work, and sometimes they can, and that is not exclusive to developing countries or economies in transition. This happens in the U.S., and it happens in developed countries. Unemployment, homelessness, we have it in our backyard. What are we doing? So we're working with faith-based organizations to address this, but this is one of the main causes also for poverty. You don't have a job, you don't get an income, the government cannot support you forever, and there are also limited resources. So is this how we want to live a society? Why does the church have the welfare program? Why do we have a self-reliance approach? Because we believe that to get out of poverty, you have to provide for yourself and not depend on external factors. That can be applied globally. We talk about not depending on foreign aid and not making foreign aid a chronic problem for many developing countries. So we applied that at the individual level, self-reliance level, but then we can go into the global level, and we call that sustainable development, having them thrive and find the means to provide for themselves, including employment. Lack of access to clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. And this is extremely important because this leads to diseases and leads to many of the challenges that prevent people from having the means to get out of poverty. We talk about water, and we give for granted that we just switch a key and then we have water in our apartments, in our houses, and our schools. Somalia is going through a drought, and in order to get water, some of the girls, because the girls the one who had to go to get water, had to walk miles away to get a bucket of water and bring it back home, maybe twice a day. They provide water for their families. The time that they're spending walking to the well and coming back, they're not getting educated. If they don't get an education, it's very unlikely they will become local leaders. If they don't become local leaders with experience, it's very unlikely they will become prime ministers or doctors or lawyers or simply caregivers, because they can't. So water and sanitation is an important aspect that prevents people from thriving and developing. Climate change. Earth stewardship, environmental stewardship, caring for the planet. It's a reality. Whether it's man-made or not, I'm not going to get into that debate. What I can tell you is that the reality is people are displaced because climate is changing. And the impact on their lives, I don't think that if you ask someone who lives in an island that is going to be submerged in water in 10, 20 years, cares how happened. They care that it's happening to them, and it's happening now. And that is going to prevent them from really, again, developing businesses, creating environments where they can really thrive. Again, poverty, lack of education. I need to say more. Not everyone needs to go to college, but everyone should have the chance to choose where to go, what to study, and how to educate themselves. And education is much more than just institutions. It comes from the family, culture, tradition, religion. In many aspects, people don't have the privilege of this. As I said, Afghanistan is one of the examples. But in other countries, education is limited and controlled by the government, and there's a limitation also into who can do what. We are very privileged to be in an institution like BYU that also sponsors with scholarships, grants, but also through subsidizing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints subsidizes education here. This is a tremendous privilege, and I hope that you understand what a blessing it is to be in a place like this. What I was when I was at BYU Idaho, what a blessing it was. Lack of public works and infrastructures. That is a picture that I took in Kenya. This is in the slums of Kibera. 1.1 million people live under $1.9 a day. And they don't have infrastructures. I was there with a program of UN Habitat to see the results of building toilets for people who live in slums. And toilets, the program that we have is a very interesting one. We did not build the toilets for them. We trained them in plumbing and construction, and they built it themselves for one reason, so that if it breaks, they can fix it, so that they don't rely on anyone else, and they don't need the means. And at the same time, we train them to get a profession so that they can, in the future, do more and more for the community. That is one of the programs that we have, and is supported by, in this case, the Episcopal Church, among others. Global health crisis. We just had a pandemic. COVID-19 is not the first one, will not be the last one, but it impacted many communities, so much so that the advances that we had made in reducing extreme poverty, we lost them. Now we had to start from zero in many areas. Lack of social and governmental support system. Not everyone has the privilege of having social security. And social security is the platform that supports you when you cannot support yourself. Not everyone is privileged enough to have the church programs that supports you when you cannot support yourself. That is not a reality for everyone, but we can learn at the UN and many other organizations from what faith-based organizations are doing in this sense. Lack of personal safety nets. Not everyone has the means to have savings. Not everyone has an account where they can say, you know what, just in case rainy days come, this is what is going to rescue me from, if I lose my job, provide for myself. And finally, high costs and debt. And this is very common, developed countries and whatnot. It is fascinating how when Joseph was in Egypt and he advised the Pharaoh, you know what, you better save a little bit because bad times are going to come. We're going to have 7 good years and 7 bad years, and well, we better be prepared. That privilege came from revelation from God to a man of God that decided to advise the politician of the time on what to do and how to prepare for bad times. And that is an example, an early example of how faith traditions have always been involved in the well-being of people. Had it not been for that vision or for that prophetic approach, the 12 tribes would never have survived the famine and the drought that they experienced. So think of the consequences of listening to a faith leader, in this case, a man of God, a prophet, that advised a global leader, in that case. Egypt was pretty sizable at that time, and what the consequences were for all of us today of having the faith that we have, the knowledge that we have, the scriptures, and so on. So the work of faith-based organizations in this world is tremendous. I know I've spoken a lot, and as I said, I was not going to talk tons, but I'm going to share with you with few examples how faith-based FBOs, let's refer them to that, like that, can address all these issues. With regards to inequality and in social justice, could you please tell me one scripture, one faith tradition that says that one person is more important than another? That if someone has a disability, is of lesser value than another person. That because someone looks different, they don't have the same rights than another person. Faith tradition today that believes that people can be valued depending on how much they can contribute to society. That if you have a disability or you're born with Down syndrome, you're a burden. You should be eliminated. Faith traditions show how we can treat each other and how we can really eliminate discrimination and inequalities in society. And what we have seen, the LDS Church, Catholic Church, Islamic Relief, which is a very strong partner of the church in many instances, they have taught us that people are valued because of who they are. They're human beings, and they have tremendous value because they're children of God, creation of God, whatever it is, but the motivation is that they matter, and we all can contribute and do something about it. Conflict is often blamed on religion. Israel and Palestine right now, people say that it's a religious conflict of sorts. In the Middle East, the Arab world against the, Western world. Allow me to give you my perspective as a UN official. There is, and I hope not to get into too much trouble for saying this, there's no such thing as Islamic terrorism. There's terrorism. Bad people creating terror that use Islam as an excuse to do bad things. We have seen how some Christian groups have terrorized other groups in some countries, and we don't call it Christian terrorism. We have to be careful with the language that we use. I'm a communications officer. Something I've learned is that we have to be extremely, extremely cautious in how we jump to conclusions, how we just jump the gun and say certain things because it's the narrative that we hear in the media, because it's what our friends are saying. Let's be clear. Terrorism is one of the main challenges the world is facing in any form. But terrorism doesn't have to be labeled somehow, because what we're doing is we're just labeling communities. Interesting, after September 11th, globally, everyone that was at airports looked at people who were dressing with Muslim clothing or religious clothing differently. The perceived threat the unwanted bias that we had. Everyone, I fell for that too. Everyone did. Because the narrative was like, can you really trust that this is happening? Faith traditions play an important role in teaching that religion, really understood, well understood, cannot be a source of conflict. It will never be a source of conflict. It will never generate conflict. It can appease conflict. It can bring solutions to conflict. Post-conflict, the UN works in peace to alleviate poverty in many senses. When we work on peace, we work on 4 aspects of peace: peacemaking, peace building, peacekeeping, and peace enforcing. Post-conflict, let's say a region that was at war, they have 2 communities, A and B. A is the community that perpetrated the crimes. B were the victims of those crimes. A and B need to live together because there's a treaty now, an agreement that we will live peacefully in this region and we'll be doing good for each other. How do you explain to the group B, to the baker in group B, that he has to make bread and provide food for the man that raped his wife or assassinated his children? How do you tell group A that they got away with it and it's okay because group B will have to just compromise and to say, hey, we want peace, we had to compromise. We were the victims, but how can we prevent further victimization of groups? The best programs that I have seen in reconciliation, just bringing communities together to work with each other to understand the causes of conflict and how we can prevent them from arising again, are faith-based organizations. Those who have God as a motivation, those who inspire, say, you know what, God expects so much from you. God does not want your children and future generations to pay the price of the mistakes that previous ones made. So it is your duty to come up with solutions because it is your duty to care for your brothers and sisters, which are of all sides, of everywhere. Faith traditions are the leading force in reconciliation when it's really understood and when it's put to practice. And that reconciliation brings prosperity, not conflict, and eliminates poverty, or at least reduces and alleviates poverty. Imagine how powerful it would be if the motivation, the main motivation for people to do good, which is God, is taken into consideration more often than it is right now. We would have seen a very different world. So we work with faith-based organizations because they get it, because they've been at it for a long time, because they're amazing at what they do, and because people trust them. They're not going to trust this white dude that comes from New York and from Spain with an accent, and he claims to be an expert on UN issues. Trust me, if I go into the Middle East or Africa and many places, if I go to Kenya, they will call me Muzungu. Muzungu is a white man. And the Muzungu, when I go to Kenya, they say, you're Muzungu, you're smart Muzungu, but Muzungu. So they think I'm smart. If I go to Nigeria, I will be an Ojimbo. It's the same one, the white man, the non-black man from Africa. I'm the same. You're an Ojimbo, you're smart Ojimbo, but you're still an Ojimbo. I have the privilege of being called that I'm African at heart because of the work that we have done with some CSOs on the ground there. And it's fun to be seen as a brother, to be seen as an equal beyond the skin color. Because it happens, I'm a minority in many places. I live in Harlem, in New York City. I'm a minority already by definition where I live. And I have never felt discriminated. So I cannot understand how we can see other people differently and how that can escalate to conflict. Because I'm taught one thing, which is everyone is important in this life and everyone matters, because I have religious principles that teach me that. Hunger and malnutrition, we know about the soup kitchens and we know about all the services that we provide. But beyond that, how do we teach people that they can have crops and provide them with the means to? You see, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has these vending machines during the Christmas time that is, okay, I'm going to donate a goat or I'm going to donate this. By the way, it's not for us to distribute, is we collaborate with others through interfaith engagement with other CSOs and NGOs so that they can provide those services. Many of them rely heavily on those donations that are through the Church of Jesus Christ, through Just Serve, and many of the mechanisms. And why do you think that the church invests so much effort and administratively also costs? Because they absorb all the costs. 100% of the donations go into the NGOs that deserve them or the programs that are there to help people. Why would the church absorb those costs? Why would it take that hit and pay so much money to organize those things? Those vending machines are not cheap. And the coordination and people behind, working behind, faith in action. That's interfaith dialogue. And that allows that perhaps a family will get a goat that will get milk from the goat so that they can make cheese, so that they can exchange cheese for produce, so that they can provide for their family, so that they don't have to go hungry. Something as simple as a donation in New York City or Salt Lake City can have an impact on someone on the other side of the world because of the faith of those contributing. Health systems, employment, the church teaches in our church, but also many other Catholic charities has a very strong program on employment also and finding people. The Episcopal Church has a very strong employment system and refugee resettlement program. Ryan referred to the briefing that we had on the role of faith-based organizations in refugee resettlement. And we partnered with Islamic Relief, with the Episcopal Church, with UNICEF USA, and Latter-day Saint Charities, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And what happened, we saw is like, we did exactly the same thing. Why don't we collaborate? So Islamic Relief works with Latter-day Saint Charities. So in those countries where Christian NGOs cannot operate because of the name or because of the faith tradition behind them, then Islamic Relief said, don't worry, we can do that for you. How can we collaborate? You need what? A plane to ship? We can ship. You provide us with the goods, and we will make sure that it gets to the right people. And we trust them, and they trust us. And that is working with faith-based organizations. And we at the UN are very proud of that engagement. We have Ryan and I belong to a task force. I belong on the UN side. He belongs on the civil society side. And I'm going to give you the name to understand the complexity of the UN, okay? Is the United Nations Interagency Task Force on Engagement with Faith-Based Organizations for Sustainable Development, Peace and Security, and Human Rights. That's the name of the group. We call it the Task Force on Religion and Sustainability, for short. Because otherwise, it would be interesting to say that every meeting. Similar to, I'm an ex-Mormon because now I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I cannot say Mormon anymore, right? So we're trying to find language to accommodate, but we've gone the other way around. We've gone to the long, well, now at the UN, we've gone to the shortened version. Otherwise, people will not pay attention to us, on top of many other reasons. That engagement that we had with refugee resettlement really led to the understanding. One of the panelists was a refugee from Pakistan, I believe. And he explained how he now is a provider of services to new refugees that arrive in the US or elsewhere in the world. People, we have 80 million people displaced in this world due to conflict, due to crisis, humanitarian assistance is not provided, due to climate. As I said, we have for the first time in history climate refugees that are really impacted by what's going on. And on the other end, on the receiving end, is the faith community for the most part. I don't know if you know this, but one of the most successful resettlement programs for refugees in the US is in Utah. It is the only red state in the United States that welcomes refugees, no questions asked, going through the vetting process and whatnot. But we understand that in our faith tradition, at one point in history, we were refugees. I was not. I was in Spain. I was converted later on. But some people of our faith were refugees at one point. That sticks to you. That really, really stays with you. And that gives you an empathy that other people may not have. So that makes Utah unique. It was not by accident that we decided to do the conference in Utah, right, Baldomero? We thought that it would be a good place to show the world how amazing Utah people are, and at the same time show people in Utah, the UN is not the devil. We promise. We are not here to take away your guns. We don't want your guns. We're not interested in your guns or anything. Trust me. We want the best of you. We want to give you the best of the world. And by working together, we can really make a difference. And we have seen that in action. Faith-based engagement is key in addressing all of these issues. I want to talk about the global health crisis, the pandemic. The people, what an interesting situation. I'm going to be very LDS tonight. What an interesting blessing to have a doctor as a prophet during the time of a pandemic. Looks like, I don't know, maybe Heavenly Father had something to do with it or had an understanding that we would need that guidance. But because of the understanding of President Nelson, we were able to really address certain issues. Among them, the misinformation and disinformation on vaccination and on face masks and whatnot. Our challenge, that people love to politicize everything. So all of a sudden it became a political issue between two parties, instead of a health issue with professionals. And we politicize every single word. And we do not afford anyone to make a mistake or to say something wrong because, there's an agenda in there. There's a hidden, they want to control everything. We heard so much so as to the vaccines contain microchips implanted by Bill Gates to control people. We heard it all. So problematic that we had to launch a new campaign at the UN called Verified, because people were dying because they were not getting vaccinated due to misinformation. Let me be clear. If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's up to you. I'm not saying that you have to be forced. But if you don't get vaccinated because you have the wrong information or misinformation or false information, that's a problem. If you make your decision based on your understanding and reality and facts, you are free to do whatever you want. And the consequences are not. Not because you didn't get vaccinated, you didn't die or anything. But this is from someone who, I spent 10 days in the hospital due to COVID. My father spent 6 months, and he spent 4 of those 6 months in the ICU. And he almost died 3 times. And I had people from all over the world, from Sapporo, Japan, a community of wonderful sisters of the Sacred Heart, praying and giving masses for my father. And the unity that I felt from my colleagues and my friends in that faith engagement, people who believe in vaccines and not, it was before the vaccines were even a thing. What I saw is that faith sustained my family and me, but I realized I learned a lot about the pandemic, and I realized that we were being manipulated by political sides of all kinds, and we were not listening to the experts. And I talked with it so happened that I was very sick also during the pandemic. I had a stroke while I was here in Utah and on a trip to Thailand. And I had aphasia, I lost memory and whatnot. I was off work for 10 months. I could not work for 10 months. And it was all during the pandemic. And I was alone in New York, and I didn't have a family. And my church support system was not there because they couldn't visit because I was a high risk. Then they found out that it was because I had a congenital heart defect from birth. My heart had a little hole. So a ton of things. And on all this, I was thinking, if I cannot, because I had lost memory and the capacity to remember certain words and to express myself, I am a communications officer. If I cannot talk again, if I cannot speak again in public, what is going to happen with me? What is going to support me? I don't have any plan B, and I'm sure I'm not stupid and I can learn to do something. For sure I can flip burgers, and it's very honorable and there's nothing wrong with it. But I've been studying, I've been preparing myself. My parents sacrificed a lot for me to do, and then what is going to happen? And then fear of, oh my goodness, what if I don't have an income? Because church is going to support me a little bit at the beginning, but I cannot become a chronic dependent on the system. And a lot of faith from many people, including my family and myself, and friends, and very close friends, and amazing people in my life is what carried me. So I did not get to the point of poverty at no point, and I was not even at risk. But in my mind, I was going through the worst case scenarios. And then I realized this worst case scenario is a reality for millions of people on this planet. What a way to be humbled and to be called to repentance, perhaps, and to be told, remember, maybe you need to be a little bit nicer and a little bit more sympathetic with other people and not so judgmental, and just understand that when they act or react in one specific way, perhaps it's because they've gone through a challenge that is not visible. Like yours, I had a stroke that visibly I didn't have any physical signs other than just not being able to speak or remember even my name at times. My heart was okay on the outside. The little hole made a mess, and I was born with it for 38 years. I didn't even know that it was there. How many times have I looked at people and have judged because of disabilities that are not visible? And how many times I just think like, maybe they can work. They can just a homeless person. Again, it's so important, the faith approach to these challenges in society, that we need to be reminded constantly, at least I have to, that we have a duty and an obligation. As an international civil servant of the UN, I have a professional platform to service other people. But each one of you in your personal lives, you can service those around you. This morning I was asked by a employee of BYU, what can we do to help the UN in all these wonderful efforts? And I felt honored. I said, oh, wow, you like the UN? Not bad. And then I told him something that I really believe wholeheartedly, that is, Keep doing what you're doing in your home, to your family, to your community. Keep doing what you're doing in your own school and in your neighborhood. There's 125,000 of us at the UN. There's 8 billion people on this planet. We cannot reach everyone for as much as we want to service everyone. And we believe that everyone deserves that. But guess what? We have you. The little secret of the UN, that we need you much more than you need the UN, by far. That we need you in your daily lives, that we need you in your families to be good examples and good leaders. I said also this morning, I don't know of a good global leader that is not a good leader at home. You're not born a leader. You learn how to put to service the best skills and talents that God has given you. And that service will grow. And by doing the dishes and taking the garbage out, and then making sure that your bed is not, or your bedroom, sorry, is not a mess, or that your house is not like a zoo, by asking your neighbor if they need something, maybe more on the lawn or whatever it is, those little acts of service build character and build leadership. True leaders are the ones who service others. Just think of this. How can we expect a global leader to service people, millions of people they will never know and meet, if they cannot do that for the little few people that they love and they live with? What kind of expectation is that? So we rely heavily on those principles that we have been taught and that we share with many faith traditions. Be Christianity, Hinduism, Taoism, you name it. All faith traditions have those principles of being good to others. The golden rule is not exclusive to ours. It is shared by all major religions and the small ones too. And in that sense, that's what we can learn so much from them at the UN when we work on interfaith dialogue, but also on humanitarian assistance. When we talk about faith engagement, we talk at the micro level, individual, family, community, congregation level. We talk of the macro level, globally. World Vision, Latter-day Saint Charities, Islamic Relief, all of them work macroscopically, thinking, okay, how can we change the world to become a better place? Multilateralism and collaboration, we cannot work in silos. We need of the private sector, civil society, government officials, individuals, academic institutions, all working together to be able to make a difference. The Ballard Center is a perfect example of that. Social good is at the core of what they do, and they know how to connect with different people. They connect the dots so that they can really produce great programs. UVU has an interesting approach in how they connect the UN with all the different programs that they have academically, but also in research. And you have amazing products that come out of that. The conference last year, the first International Academic Conference on the Sustainable Development Goals, is a perfect example of multilateral and collaboration approaches. The UN with an academic institution, other academic institutions globally, and the private sector that also participated, and other individuals and students who contributed to make the most successful conference. The outcome of the conference last year was a collection of 78 papers, academic papers, peer-reviewed papers, 1,600 pages on sustainability from all fields and from all over the world. Peer-reviewed, meaning that experts in those fields review the papers and then we publish them. It is now in the Library of the United Nations, a physical copy, and digitally is accessible through the UVU website for free, because we believe that everyone has the right to have access to certain resources. And what does the UN do? Do a lot, I promise. I love when President Trump said a few years ago, well, people at the UN just go there and have fun and do nothing else. Well, I promise that he has not seen me or my office ever. Ryan, we have fun, right? We do have fun. Do we work? A lot. You can trust him. If you don't trust me because I work for the UN and I get paid to say this, you can trust him. He works for the church and he will tell you the same thing. He's an honest man. I'm telling you. I try to be honest too, and I promise I am. I promise you that it is precisely my faith that makes me happy in what I do, because I have found that really when I got to know the organization, we do pretty amazing things. I try to help. So I would say that in spite of me being there, the UN is doing okay. Prevention versus alleviation, this is something very important. And another religious principle, don't wait until the problem is already chronic. Can we prevent poverty from really becoming an issue by providing education, access to resources, and the understanding that these things can be mitigated and they can be prevented instead of having to address them once it's a little bit too late. Prevention in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, again, is about the welfare program, but also the self-reliance, the storage, and whatnot. Why do you think that our leaders insist so much in doing that? Because when the time comes, and it will come, because it always comes, hopefully not. I pray that you don't face those issues, but you may face in your lives. Many of us will face many challenges. Be prepared is better than having to address those issues head on when they happen. And finally, remembering that with all the people in the world facing the different challenges, with all the conflicts that we have an obligation as international civil servants at the UN to look at everyone equally. I want to speak now externally. You have an obligation as a member of the church and maybe a member of your faith traditions to look at people equally, to treat people with respect and with love and with charity. And the whole motto that the Christian world uses of what would Jesus do can also be translated into what would God do. And in many traditions, what would Gandhi do and what would Mother Teresa do? And those good examples that we have had throughout history, what would they do? What is expected of us? And that is, let's make sure that we provide for those who are in need, no matter the circumstances. Let's make sure that we become the very best version of ourselves because we put other people first. And we understand that when we are at the service of others, we are in the service of our God, right? I live my professional life in such a way that I try to never forget that all that I have is a blessing and it's not a given, that it can end at any moment. I have lost 35 colleagues in Gaza these past days, and more will die in other conflicts, unfortunately. We'll have more people joining the UN to fight inequalities and conflict and whatnot. And if there's one thing that we don't like is to politicize issues. We want to make it very clear. This is not about politics, it's about people. I may say something very controversial also. Politics is something that first world countries can afford. It's a luxury that first world countries can afford. Developing countries and economies in transition don't have that luxury. They cannot afford it. If they do, they usually get division as a result because politics, wrongly understood and not played well, can be the source of conflict in many instances. And the problem is that developing countries and economies in transition, when they try to mimic the politics of developed countries that they think are role models, and trust me, there are no role models in many places in the world. I know, I work at the UN with 193 member states, and I can tell you that no one of them is perfect. And many of them make many mistakes. And the two observers too. And many other organizations, we make mistakes. But I promise you that if we work together, not only poverty, but we can alleviate the suffering of the world. And that is the goal that we have as an organization of the United Nations. And I hope that you can at least sympathize with the idea that our challenge is that we have to do it pleasing at the same time 193 member states. That we have to keep 193 governments happy at the same time is an impossible task that nevertheless we will never stop trying because we love people. I like to say that the church promises me eternal happiness, and I quote this a lot. I want to believe that that eternal happiness is a result of hard work and faith and commitment, and that's nice and pretty, but what about now? I believe, and I have learned, that through my service at the UN, I understand that the work of the United Nations is to ensure that people have access to sustainable happiness. The same happiness that I'm promised eternally through my faith tradition is something that I'm working at the UN so that people have it now by creating environments where they can thrive and they can be happy, whatever the happiness looks like. Remember the goat for the cheese and the produce? Maybe happiness for someone is that, and that's okay. We don't have the same approaches to happiness, but if we understand and respect that, and if we work together with faith traditions, with secular organizations, academic institutions, and everyone in between, then I can guarantee you that this world will be a much better place. And then we will be keeping our promise of being our brothers and sisters keepers. And that is, I think, a very good goal to have in the world. Don't you agree? Yeah. Thank you. I finished talking. You can. Thank you. You have any questions? Is there there's a mic. Perfect. Be my guest.
A lot of us here, kind of organizations, we're in the world. What are the sorts of things that we can do to get involved in order to be, in order to help become change makers and help support, just in global problems and things like that?
Do what makes you happy and services other people. I mean, you need to be passionate about something to be able to be successful at that something. You need to be driven by a good motivation. Faith is one of the strongest ones, if not the strongest one, to do good in the world. So I would encourage you to strengthen your faith, to continue working in your community. Again, you want to change the world? Sure. Educate others. When you hear something that is not true or incorrect or opinion and not information, correct it. Don't be afraid of saying, people, I like to be corrected. I'm not a native speaker, so when I pronounce a word wrong and someone says, well, it's not that, it's that. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. People who really want to learn, people who want to change the world are willing to learn and to be corrected. So share with them if they're wrong. Accept corrections also. And then in your service, always make sure that really you're doing it for the right reason. It's good to serve. It's good to donate. When you're a millionaire and you give money to charity, good. Don't get me wrong. Please keep doing that. If you're a millionaire, give as much as you can, even a little bit of your money. But when you do it for the right reason, there's an added bonus and component, a spiritual growth that will benefit you and also will benefit the recipient of it. So you both grow spiritually. I'm not afraid as a UN official to say that my faith is what drives me in many cases to deal with people or not to yell at people or not to curse. And say, okay, well, calm down. In Spain we say, 1, 2, y 3, 4, 5 y 6, yo me calmaré, todos lo veréis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'll calm down and all of you will see it. I have that as a mantra in my life, in my office. Cannot imagine. So what can you do to influence other people? Be an example. I mean, we talk always about preaching by example. Is serving others. At the UN, in spite of what people say about us, we will continue serving the international community. In spite of the accusations, Antonio Guterres, our Secretary General, yesterday, Israel asked for his resignation. He said he should resign because he has said this about Hamas and whatnot. And say, no, that's not what he said. But he stood stoic and he said, you know what? I'll take it. I don't have a problem with you saying, but I will continue my work because the people out there, they don't care about our argument or our fight. They care about what they need. So if we can be agents of change, if we can act and not be acted upon, preferably, then we have a duty to do that. And if your motivation is faith, strengthen your faith, and then you will see better results. No more questions. You're tired of me, right? It's like, this talk. This person doesn't stop talking. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Queipo, thank you very much.
Felipe.
Okay.
Mr.
Felipe.
Queipo would be my father.
Okay, great. We're on a first name basis.
I reserved that title for him.
From what I understand, a recent literature on the role of religion in conflict transformation resolution, which is one of the issues that you brought up, suggests that there's a lack of involvement in non-Abrahamic traditions. And I appreciated that you brought up the organizations that the UN isn't involved with, and they did happen to be sort of, at least in your examples, a majority of like Christian and Islamic organizations. I'd be curious if you would speak to the point of what the UN Outreach Committee is doing to partner with organizations that are not from the Abrahamic tradition.
The people of the book, we call it, yeah. We work with Hinduism on climate a lot. The Oxford Center for Climate is a Hindu, or is Hindu inspired or motivated to do it. We have Buddhism is super important at the UN. We have the Table of Understanding that is an interfaith dialogue. We have the Unitarian Universalist group. How many more we have? Buddhist Uchi Foundation, we work with them. Arigato, which is an interfaith inspired by spirituality. So I mentioned the big ones because those are the ones who have the most resources to do good and to make a difference. But we welcome everyone. In my office, we welcome CSOs of all sizes. We have Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. We work with them. And also very, very tiny CSOs in the middle of Guatemala advocating for the rights of minorities with only 13 people and $2,000 if of budget a year. We don't care. So long as you are people of good doing and you have a faith or no faith at all. We also work with atheist groups and humanist groups, and that's fine. We need to acknowledge that there's a reality for many people. So our engagement is universal, but we use usually the big examples because those are the ones who have the most resources to really make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all that you've done to help us see more about the UN. I'm starting to study international relations, and I want to know what led you to the direction of working for the UN instead of other organizations like the State Department or other organizations like that.
So I'm a Spanish citizen. I would not be able to work for the State Department. I don't know if I would want to work for the State Department. Ryan, how was your experience at the State Department? He is a former diplomat with the State Department, by the way. I don't have a cool story. I landed at the UN by accident. I was at BYU, Idaho. I applied for an internship because a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, said, you know, the UN is looking for interns. I said, well, I need one to graduate, so I will apply. And I was rejected. So I found the number of the recruiter at the UN, and I kind of harassed her for 45 minutes over the phone. I work for the UN now, so it worked out. I fell in love with the UN. She gave me a chance, and is one of the biggest blessings in my life because she trusted that I could do some good. Out of a 6-month internship, 3 months into my internship, they called me to the office of the chief of the section, and they said, you know what? You're kind of okay. You're not too bad. How would you like to work for us after your internship? I was like, well, okay. At a time when it was possible at the UN. That is not possible anymore. Imagine unemployment versus working for the UN right after school. I don't know, tough choice, right? So I definitely accepted and went back to BYU Idaho, finished, came back to New York, went back to New York. And 15 years later, I am a very happy camper doing something that I adore and that I am very passionate about. And I know that I may not be making millions that I could be making somewhere else, but I sleep very well at night thinking that we do some good in the world. And that is priceless. And I value that a lot. So what led me to stay, or what has led me to stay in spite of bureaucracy, the challenges, the overtime that you don't get paid either, it's just that we do good. We really do good in the world. And I've seen the impact. I have seen the BYU community in Colombia, Cartagena, women who do handicraft, and they sell for a fair price so that they can put their daughters through college, and changing communities because of programs that we have with NGOs on the ground. That, I'm telling you, is like a little bit of how heaven must feel like when you see like, wow, we did something good. So yeah, that's why.
I'm wondering if you have any advice from a communications perspective. If you're working in a developing country that saving face is very important culturally, how do you go in and do an intervention like we're going to decrease domestic abuse, right? But it's something that's kind of a faux pas society-wise to even talk to them about that. Do you have any advice communication-wise? Help them save face, but also make a difference in the community.
Yes, don't go there like a maverick thinking that you have the answer to the challenge, and find a key partner on the ground that you can understand, you can have a good conversation with, be it a faith-based organization, which usually they have a lot of trust, and convey the similarities in your approaches, and then find the way for them to implement those programs, and you will be the support system that they need. Empowering doesn't mean giving any power to anyone that I don't have more power than anyone else. Empowering means creating the environment and the foundation so that people can empower themselves. When we work with key actors on the ground, and as I said, particularly faith-based organizations, we can really see an acceleration into the changes socially. And when the change happens from within, imagine if I show up in, I don't know, Rwanda or my country, this white dude that is from Spain telling them what they need to do. Good luck to me. So, not gonna happen. But if I find a good partnership from an NGO that has been working on the ground for a few years, particularly local NGOs, and faith traditions that have been working with the community, they're known. When you share with them the same values and you share with them the approaches, they can show you how to be more effective in developing. So maybe you have the resources, they have the knowledge and the contacts, combined and working together. That's how you make a difference. So engage in local actors for change, particularly if it's a gender issue, a woman. A white dude is not gonna make much of a difference for a community that has a tradition that is perpetuated by Black women or women of color. So let's be real. I have my limitations, many limitations, trust me. But one thing I know is how to convey information to someone who's willing to listen. So find that someone who's willing to listen and then make them replicators of your information, and they will be much better actors and communicators than you. Because I think of the challenges that Christ faced in his mortal ministry. I remember the opposition. I was doing a meal today when I talk with the missionaries, and I tell them, when I try to explain to them that failure is not, I mean, some of them say, well, I didn't have any baptism of mission and whatnot. It's like, what makes you think that you're better than Christ when he was not able to convince most of the people he came across with? What makes you a better missionary than he was? And what is the approach to service? Do what you need to do. Serve because you love people and you want them in a better place. Don't serve because, please, if you're serving a mission or you have served a mission or you are doing something because of numbers, of credibility or reputation, reconsider. When you do it for the right reasons, you find the strength. And I promise you that you see horrible things in many areas of the world. I have seen tough things. And the main strength comes from knowing that, again, there's a power above for me as a believer. There's a power above that drives me to see the best in people and see them through the lens of Christ. And that's okay. As I said, as an international civil servant, as a UN official, it's fine to have a personal faith and to have it as a driving force for what you do. And I count it as a blessing for me. This is a very easy environment to talk about this, right? When I talk to other audiences or when I talk to other groups, I tell them, go and find your faith, the inspiration and the motivation for doing good for you. Maybe a different name for the same God. You may call him Allah, or you may call him Mother Nature, you name it, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. You can, if that is your source of inspiration and motivation, strengthen it. I was telling your colleague, your classmate, or fellow student, strengthen your faith because you're going to need it. And there will be many challenges in life. And what has allowed me to go through challenges, even at work, has been my faith tradition, but also my friends, support systems, people who share your faith and who understands you and you can talk with. And so, again, I like this whole model you have is do good better. Find the way to do it better by strengthening the original reason why you are here, which is as children of God, we are supposed to support each other. Welcome.